All right, so we are finishing up chapter 10 where we left off from in class yesterday. So we were talking about the spiritual awakenings and the utopian communities and new religious movements that came about with the Second Great Awakening. So John Humphrey, Noyes, and Oneida. This is when the minister John Humphrey Noyes he set out basically creating a community that defined sexuality and gender roles in new ways that were seen radical. And so he basically developed his own belief system that centered on reforming family and household relationships. And him and his followers, they embraced complex marriage, which is where everybody in the community is basically married to one another. And Noyes, he sought to free women from being regarded as their husband's property and to free them from endless childbearing and child rearing. So this, reminds you, this kind of branched off from Fourier's socialism because remind you, at that time, women were technically property of their husbands. They did not have rights of that nature. What we know of today was not available during this time frame. And so, opposition to complex marriage in Noyes' hometown of Putney, Vermont, it basically prompted him to move the colony to Oneida, New York in the mid-1840s. And the Oneida community, it became financially self-sufficient when one of the members invented a steel animal trap. And this is when others turned to silver manufacturing. And then the silver making business, it basically survived into the 20th century. And so the historical significance of the Shakers, the Fouriers, and the Noyes, and his followers, it basically stemmed from the radical questioning of traditional sex norms and of the capitalist values and class divisions of the emerging market society. But at the end of the day, religion is still their foundation. They are all still Christians. They just, like I said, they are perceiving the word a different way and have different ideals and morals. And so their utopian communities, it stood as basically countercultural blueprints for a more egalitarian social and economic order. So talking about Joseph Smith and Mormonism. Mormonism, it emerged from the religious fervor in New England during the Second Great Awakening. And so founder Joseph Smith, he basically believed that God had singled him out to receive a special revelation of divine truth. And this was basically, equated in the Book of Mormon. And so Smith, he organized the Church of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which are also known as the Mormons, and it's also a key term for you guys. And basically with the Latter-day Saints, they affirm traditional patriarchal authority, basically meaning male-dominated, everything runs through the men. And they encouraged hard work, saving of earnings, and entrepreneurship. And they also started a church-directed community that intended to inspire moral perfection. And so the Mormons, they eventually settled in Nauvoo, Illinois, and they became the largest utopian community in America. And so resentment towards the Mormons, it basically turned to overt hostility when Smith, he refused to abide by some of the Illinois laws, because the Mormons, they believed in polygamy, having more than one wife, and that was illegal. And so he asked that Nauvoo to be turned into a separate federal territory within Illinois. And at this time, remind you, America is not even what we know it as of today. So that was not going on. They were not going to let that just, come about for him. And so then he declared himself a candidate for president. He didn't go through, the process or nothing. He just was saying, like, I'm going to run for presidency, and that's that. And so, in secret, Smith, he preached a new revelation justifying polygamy, and that's basically the practice of a man having multiple wives. And Smith, he pointed to a biblical precedent for this practice of patriarchal or plural marriage. And plural marriage is also a key term for you guys. And so when he's pointing to the Bible, he's pointing to the Old Testament for one. And when you're pointing to the Old Testament, he's talking about King Solomon. King Solomon, the wisest man in the Old Testament. King Solomon, he had 600 wives. He had 400 concubines. But many kings and, leaders at that time frame had multiple wives, especially depending on their wealth and their status. And of course, they were not in America as well. So, in 1844, Illinois officials, they arrested Smith and they charged him with treason for allegedly conspiring to create a Mormon colony in Mexican territory. Even though he did do so, there's still a huge Mormon community within Mexico. And an anti-Mormon mob, they stormed the jail in Carthage, Illinois, where Smith and his brother Hiram were being held, and they murdered them both at the jail because they were preachers who preached entrepreneurship and multiple wives. So, even if you don't agree with polyamory, it's nothing for you to kill someone over. But at this time in America, this is what we are seeing. And so some Mormons who did reject polygamy, they remained in the Midwest, which was led by Smith's son, Joseph Smith III. About 6,500 Mormons, however, they fled the U.S. under the guidance of Brigham Young, who was Smith's leading disciple. And as I said, this Mexican territory is still very, prominent for Mormons. Even American Mormons, they go there. And so, Mormons in today's culture, these are the people who you consider sister wives. This right here is the picture of the burning of Nauvoo Temple, because after they murdered Joseph and his brother Hiram at the prison, they went and burnt down the temple. And this is, of course, when the people fled Nauvoo, Illinois. And this right here is the Mormon track. So as you guys can see, they're leaving right up here in New York. And then from New York, this is Nauvoo. But as you guys can see, they kind of made their way out all of these ways. And this is where the significant Mormon population was in the West, right here. And this was in, 2020. Not 2020, 2010. Today's Mormons. All right. So, urban cultures and conflicts. So, a new culture was created by rural migrants and foreign immigrants. And they basically created a new culture in the cities. And so between 1800 and 1840, America experienced a high rate of urban growth. And this urban growth, urbanization, it comes from, industrialization. And we're just at the beginning parts. The second portion of this course highly, dives into, the Industrial Revolution, industrialization as we know of it as today, which, urbanization and everything that comes with that. And so by 1860, New York, it numbered over 1 million residents. And so, that's 150 years ago, and New York is still one of the most populous states in America. So when we're talking about sex in the city, urban growth, it generated a new urban culture as young men and women adjusted to the life of hard work. And so young working class laborers, domestic servants, and factory operators, they engaged in commercialized sex. So, as I said, prostitution was not illegal at this time. It was very much legal. And so you also had men who formed homoerotic relationships as early as 1800. And the homosexual fop was an acknowledged character in Philadelphia. And so middle class youth, they strolled Broadway in the latest fashions. They wore elaborate bonnets and silk dresses for young women. And they also wore flowing capes, leather boots, and silver-plated walking sticks for young men. And so the Bahoy, as he was called, walked along a Bowery gal in a bright dress and shawl. And to some shocked observers, however, such couples represented disorder and disrespect for middle-class values of respectability and piety. Because, today you can walk out and you can see people dressed however they want. Either a lot of clothes, a little bit of no clothes, fully covered, not fully covered, however, but it's their, it's their option, it's their, their decision. But, earlier times in America, you were really like frowned upon, kind of looked at as something, I mean, people might look at people like that still to today, but we're in a time frame where people do not care, especially what other people have to say about them. All right. And so when we talk about urban entertainment, the urban working men, they saw entertainment in traditional rural blood sports or in billiard and bowling saloons. And so the more appropriate forms of entertainment for the middling classes and women, it included things like the theaters, lectures, and circuses. And the most popular theatrical entertainments were the minstrel shows, which is also a key term for you guys. And the minstrel shows, it was a complex blend of racist caricature and social criticism in which white men masqueraded as African Americans. And so when we talk about minstrel shows, this is basically blackface shows. And so, these shows, they basically, reinforce white supremacy, nativism, and class criticism of elite control of industry and politics. And so, racism and racist ways and values, they've been around for a long time. Today, it might be as low as it possibly ever could have possibly have been in America. All right, so right, popular fiction and the penny press. So by 1850, the U.S., they had over 600 magazines in publication. And so print culture, it helped Americans navigate the chaotic, unstable world of the market economy. And so it's still like that today. I'm a newsie. Watch the news, read the news, all of those things, because, even though I'm teaching you guys history, I have to still be aware of what's going on currently, to be able to be on top of my game or my knowledge. And so in New York, by the 1830s, you had 4 major penny papers, which is also a key term for you guys. And they had a combined circulation of 50,000, which reached many more readers as copies passed from hand to hand in tenements, workshops, and saloons. So, say today you go up in, you could buy newspapers from the store, and, these newspapers are for everyone in there to, buy or whatever. But, back in the day, it was more of I'm going to read this and I'm going to give it to you. Just continue to pass the knowledge, word of mouth. And also remind you at that time, America's, literacy rate was nowhere near what it is today. And so within its first 2 years of its first issue in 1835, the New York Herald was selling 11,500 copies a day, and it was the largest circulation of any American newspaper. And so the Herald's editor was colorful and controversial James Gordon Bennett, who was a brilliant businessman adept at attracting advertising revenue. And so by the time of the Civil War, Bennett had built the Herald into a political force that exerted national influence. And so it still is the New York Herald. Of course, you think more of the New York Times. But that comes into the second portion of this course as well, too.